here, and we're going to do our endless Delirium build guide. We're going to go over explosive arrow. To do that accurately, I did want to give you a forewarning of a pro-con list before I show footage or anything like that, so you can know if this build is right for you. So you're going to have very good damage as a pro once you hit breakpoints. You are going to hit spell suppression cap, you do have permanent fortified, and you do have fairly easy gearing, as we are going to be running purity of elements early, and then you basically can either stay in it or transition over if you so choose for more damage. As far as cons, you are going to need some basic crafting knowledge. I do try to break everything down for you in the notes section. It also has several DPS no-nos, so you do have to pay fairly close attention to the gear and basically follow the rules. If you don't, it really will destroy your DPS. It does have totem mechanics, which is a con for some people and a pro for others. I list it as a con just because I feel like en masse, most people would prefer not to be in totems. However, you can always use it with Focus Ballista if you want to target focus cast all the time, so there's some options here. Another con is there's no way to incorporate block into it as well, but let's go ahead and get into the gameplay. Okay, so there's a couple of mechanics you need to be aware of when playing this. We are going to be using elemental equilibrium. We are going to be using elemental overload. Another very important thing is that in your gear, you have no sources of flat fire damage anywhere. You don't want any flat fire, and you don't want any pierce. So those are kind of the no-nos to keep track of. If you have any of those things, it is a fairly major DPS breakpoint loss, and you're gonna give a lot of your damage. So the way explosive arrow basically works is that you are going to pile fuses onto unsuspecting targets. Those unsuspecting targets will then turn into a ball of explosions, like you can see there. So the goal here for the balls of explosions is you want the ball of explosions to hit to 20 as quickly as humanly possible. That gives you the most amount of sustained DPS. Now, there are two basic well-orchestrated theory crafts for how to hit those breakpoints, and I will cover those in just a moment, but I did want to give you a little bit of gameplay. So basically, you're going to be casting Frenzy. You're going to be plopping down explosive arrow totems. Remember, the more totems you have out, the faster they explode because there's more stacks. And the Frenzy just helps you. As you can see, we have max fortify permanently. We have pretty good flask uptime. It's a pretty solid build. You can kind of do anything with this. It isn't going to be the highest DPS build in the game, naturally, but what it lacks in DPS, it more than makes up for in survivability, which makes it a good Delirium candidate, because a lot of the struggle with Delirium is going to be surviving the increased damage from the monsters, more so than your actual DPS, as your DPS numbers are going to be gutted anyway. Alright, so this is going to be the suboptimal formula as far as how to calculate attacks per second. So basically, it takes into account for some assumptions, and then expected required attacks per second equals the maximum fuses minus 1 divided by the number of ballista totems times the fuse duration. Here is the optimal scenario. Now, I would highly recommend trying to calculate based on optimal because it's unrealistic, completely unrealistic, and it's not going to be 100% accurate. And here are basically a screen of values for the suboptimal, what you need to hit, and with how to get there. And here's going to be the optimal breakpoints. Again, I would not bank on this version. It's not going to be realistic in real world scenarios. All right, so as usual, we do have a multitude of different leveling points. There is the Calandra build and the cluster tree. The Calandra build is exactly the points and exactly the gear and everything that you saw in the build guide. The cluster tree is because this is going in Delirium, and you're more than likely to get cluster jewels, and quite a bit of them. These are cluster jewels to look out for specific roles on. If you choose to go that route, you are not required to by any stretch of the imagination. And most people that play this build do play it without clusters, but you can use clusters if you want to. As for the skills section, we have an Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and then the Calandra build, which is exactly what you saw in the video. Act 4 is basically at that point, you get any gem that you need at Act 4. So that's why I just put Act 4 on. You'll notice there's a melee and a bow setup. I personally level as the bow setup. I do not like leveling as the melee setup, but you can of course do it that way. And then you'll see in Act 3 is when we actually get Explosive Arrow. And then you'll see in Act 4, okay, here's everything. And then in Calandra, you can see there's some variations to some of the gems and things like that in there. As far as gear sets are concerned, there's going to be a very basic gear set to give you a borderline gear to look at. There's going to be the exact Calandra build, so you can see exactly what I was working with, as well as a goal gear section, which just gives you good things to look for. Okay, as far as the configuration settings, here you can see the Major and Minor God, as well as the Bandit quest under the General tab. Then you can see that we have boxes checked. If you are not familiar with how to check boxes, I don't do this on all builds. I did it on this build. As long as you follow the build guide, you should have all of these things. Then the calc section, you can check your attack and cast rate right here. And you can use this to see if you are within or outside of the break point, so you know if you are hitting your numbers or not. All right, as for the notes section, this is going to be the super important section for this specific build. So there's very important notes. This explains all the no-nos and the basic information you need so you don't sabotage your own DPS. Under aura options, I break down basically every which way you can get the auras that you would want. Under bow attack speed minimum breakpoints, I put the base calculation. This is the suboptimal in how to get to the number. Then under detailed gearing, it gets pretty detailed. So it'll give you 4 survivability, 4 damage. Those are raw numbers. Go over hunter gear, why it's very useful. How to navigate into certain wheels if you need to. How to get a base bow, how to craft the bow, etc, etc, etc. Jewel priorities. It's got all the nice little things that you would want to have. It will also have a forbidden jewel section with the what each one is good for, as well as a frequently asked question section. So hopefully this will answer any questions you may have regarding the build. All right, guys, so that just about wraps up us for the Explosive Arrow Totem Champion build guide. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them down below. Also, I will throw a poll up as far as what you would like me to do, kind of as like a challenge or like a goal video for hitting 1,000 subs for when we have that. I would like your feedback for that. But anyway, have a wonderful rest of your day, Exiles. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in Rayclast.